all of this stuff was already planned, and Modi went there, in my view, not just to send out a political message about Lakshadweep, but to kind of gun the system into action as far as Lakshadweep is concerned. We have a great example from just this week, Anant Ambani's wedding in Jamnagar.
Yes.
Jamnagar happens to be a high security MiG-29 base not far from the Pakistan border, where India's maritime strike fighters are based. Photography is not permitted. It's a highly secured combat aviation base of the Indian Air Force. It's also from where the petroleum fields of the Reliance industries are protected by these MiG-29s, because it's a huge economic part of the country. That airport, which is a high security defense establishment, just became India's most crowded business jet destination. Okay.
Full of paparazzi.
I'm saying the Indian Air Force must have had a thing or two to say about that. But the Indian Air Force, functions in a democracy. They know that they will have to share space. And permissions would have been taken. The Indian Air Force would have been brought on board. It's not like, the Reliance doesn't know the Indian Air Force, or the Indian Air Force doesn't know Reliance. Jamnagar is Reliance, for God's sake.
Hello and welcome to the 14th episode of Inner Defense. Hello, Shiv. How are you? Busy week, I'm guessing.
Busy week. The war has begun in the only permanent battlefield that we have here in India, the elections.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's only going to get worse from now on.
It is. I was discussing this with somebody the other day, that how the two of us are finding it quite difficult to come up with topics to talk about, because nothing seems to be happening in the world of defense. It's just all politics as far as Indian mainstream news flow is concerned. But I think this week is a bit different for the Indian Navy. A lot of events happened for the Indian Navy. I think the top brass is quite busy. The Minister of Defense, Rajnath Singh, also is attending some of these events. And that's the reason we're going to talk about the Indian Navy today, and specifically about the Indian Navy and Indian Navy's interest along the West Coast. And the very trending buzzword that's become for the last 2-3 weeks, Lakshadweep.
Yeah.
Before we get to all of that, I'll just give our listeners and viewers a list of what's happened in the last couple of days. We're recording this on 6th March, or Wednesday. So today you've had the induction of the Seahawks, the anti-submarine helicopters that took place in Kerala. I think INS Garuda, which is near Kochi in Kerala. You also had the commissioning, or I'm not sure if it's happened as we talk right now, but the commissioning of INS Jatayu, a full-fledged naval base on one of the islands of the Lakshadweep archipelago.
Yeah, it's happened. Yeah,
it's happened, right? It was already sort of a naval unit there, I'm guessing, on the Minicoy Island. It was known as Naval Detachment Minicoy, which has now been upgraded to INS Jatayu. Yesterday, you had the first day of the Naval Commanders Conference, annual conference. You had a new building being inaugurated at the Naval War College in Goa, and you also had Rajnath Singh commissioning what is known as the Phase 2A of the Karwar naval base. I'm going to come back to Karwar later in the episode, because I have something very gossipy I want Shiv to come in on, but we'll get to that towards the end of this episode. So you've had all of this happening, and like we said, all of these events have happened along India's west coast. Lakshadweep became a very sort of a buzzword for Indian media when you had the famous visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to one of the islands over there. It came against the backdrop of Maldives' current presidents leaning towards China and the whole controversy. We'll kind of get into that some other time, but that is the backdrop. Though I'm not sure, and I don't think that would be the trigger for what we're about to discuss in this episode. So we want to talk obviously about Lakshadweep, the islands, and its strategic and military importance for the Indian Navy, for India in general. Before we get to that, before we talk about Lakshadweep, I want to first actually talk about why is it that among the two flanks, so to speak, that we have, the East Coast and the West Coast, it's the Eastern Coast and the Eastern Islands that have sort of been given the importance if you compare it to Lakshadweep, for example. Lakshadweep already had one naval base, INS Dweeprakshak.
Yes.
On
Kavrati.
Yeah. But you've had the Andaman Nicobar Command, India's only tri-services operational command, which actually carries out day-to-day military functions. The other tri-service command is the Strategic Forces Command, like we discussed previously. Between the two archipelagos, how is it and why was it that India favored developing Andaman Nicobar Island as a full-fledged sort of a, maritime security unit compared to Lakshadweep, which we'll get into why we should be doing this in the near future?
So the reason for that, Dave, that's a good question. The most basic reason for that is that unlike the Andamans, which have a very, very large, this is something most people don't know, a very large land area. These are huge islands with vast geographical spread, and these are substantive islands with mountains and forests. The Lakshadweep Islands are a bunch of very, very small, geographically small islands. If you look at the Bangaram Island where the airfield is, it's the airfield is basically right along the island, across its width. The width of the island is basically practically the width of the runway. So these are hardly even islands. The Lakshadweep Islands are actually atolls, which are basically coral and seabed structures which are not full-fledged islands. So the Lakshadweep geographically doesn't have the kind of space required to support large-scale military infrastructure. That's reason number one. I'm one of the few people who've been lucky and privileged enough to have been to both the islands on multiple occasions. I've been to the Lakshadweep twice, including Minicoy, which we're going to talk about. But the Andaman Islands are not only geographically much, much larger, facilitating the establishment of full-fledged naval bases, not on one, not two, but three separate islands have full-fledged tri-service bases, Car Nicobar, I forget the other island, and then, of course, in South Andaman, which is Port Blair. So that's one of the main reasons for it. The other reason why the Andamans has been given a greater deal of focus is because they've the Lakshadweep Islands are much closer to the Indian mainland compared to the Andaman Islands. The Andaman Islands are way they're all the way across the Bay of Bengal. They're very close to Myanmar, and the southern tip of the Andaman Islands is closer to Indonesia than it is to the Indian mainland, right? So it's these are extremely faraway territories of India, and therefore the compulsion to build them up from a maritime perspective, maritime security perspective, military perspective was much more compelling. We'll come to the China aspect in just a bit, but remember that many people probably don't know that the northern few islands of the Andaman and Nicobar chain actually don't belong to India. The Coco Island, etc., belongs technically to Myanmar. And like everything else in the Indian Ocean that belongs to a smaller nation, it's basically controlled by China. So an airfield has come up on the Coco Island. And so when you look at that map, all of the Andaman Islands that you see are all Indian. But there are a bunch of islands right at the top which are not part of India, they're part of Myanmar. So all of these compulsions have meant that, India has had a much more strenuous focus on the Andaman Islands because they're much farther away. They need protection. They provide a greater deal of, access as far as an observation post and a military, base is concerned for the rest of the South Indian Ocean. And that's the reason why it has happened. But like you rightly said, Lakshadweep has so far had, a limited military presence in terms of the detachment in Minicoy, Dweep Rakshak in Kavarati, very, very limited sort of thing. Coast Guard has had much. The Coast Guard is actually the chief force in Lakshadweep, not the Indian Navy, because that's how close Lakshadweep is to Kerala and to the Indian mainland. Just a few hundred nautical miles. So the compulsion now, in fact, is to take that a little further because of the manner in which China has been trying to turn things around in Maldives, putting pressure on other island countries, Sri Lanka included. The focus on Lakshadweep has become of prime importance. And I don't think that Prime Minister Modi going there was a coincidence. I think it was very much to call attention politically, not only politically to Lakshadweep, but also to kind of clear the decks for a larger sort of systemic shift in how Lakshadweep is treated. Not just in terms of infrastructure, but as a very, very valuable military, a place for from where India can protect its interests. So that's the reason why it's happening now.
Right. So take us through what's happening in Minicoy. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, it already had what is known as a naval detachment. I don't know what that means, honestly speaking. That's just like the term that came up during my research. Now it's being upgraded, so to speak, to a full-fledged naval base, and so it gets a name called INS Jatayu, Indian Naval Station, was ship Jatayu. Uh, One, what is happening in Minicoy, and second, what you briefly referred to, that India is kind of increasingly looking at Lakshadweep. Apart from just the China angle, is also obviously the angle of global trade. We've been seeing a lot of more pirate attacks on ships that traverse through the Indian Ocean, and the Indian Navy has played one of a very forefront role in protecting these ships. In fact, I think something happened just yesterday.
Yes.
We record again, like I said, on March 6th, and March 5, the Navy put out a video and some information about some ship that had been attacked by a drone, and it was on fire, and they went in to rescue it, etc. So yeah, what's happening on Minicoy, and this rise in importance of Lakshadweep for India's strategic goals. When did it begin? Because it's obviously not as though कि हाँ PM Modi again suddenly oh चलो वहाँ पे base बनाते चलो वहाँ पे ship भेज देते. It's not like that. Obviously this has been long time coming, and people like you who've been talking to people in the defense setup, you must have heard murmurs about it here and there. So tell us, what do you know about that?
So first of all, when you say that there has been a naval detachment at Minicoy, it basically means some spare naval infrastructure. The ability to bring some fast interceptor craft, small boats. Let's be very clear that these are islands that they don't have deep water. These are basically coral atolls, which basically means that from the beach you have shallow water for many kilometers into the sea. There's no deep water comes way after, so there's no possibility of having a deep water harbor, to support warships or submarines and things like that. So that's out of the question. You can have shallow water craft like interceptor boats, patrol vessels, etc. And that's the reason why Lakshadweep has been a kind of outpost for the Coast Guard, not the Navy. The Navy is like a deep water force, not a shallow water force like the Coast Guard. So it's been the Coast Guard that has, whether it is Dweeprakshak in Kavarati or, the jetties and some of the other islands. Those are places where the Coast Guard, has established infrastructure. But but the Coast Guard is a very light-footed force, unlike the Navy, which requires heavy-duty infrastructure because they've got big ships, heavy-duty weaponry, etc. So it's not even comparable. But now, what Minicoy is getting is even the term full-fledged naval base is a little bit of a misnomer. I want to sort of just clarify that so people understand. When you say full-fledged naval base, for me, what comes to mind is something like INS Garuda in Kochi, or INS Kadamba in Karwar, or INS Rajali in Arakonam. These are big naval bases, which have infrastructure. They've got airfields. They've got places where their ships can be brought in. And you're a Bombay boy, so you know how the Indian Navy setup is in Mumbai. So this is obviously going to be of a much smaller scale, but it generally means that there will be a greater naval presence. There will be the support for aviation units, which means that helicopters can already operate. There is already an airstrip. If you take a look at a map, a Google map picture of Minicoy, it's a funnily shaped island. It's shaped like a sickle. So there's very little maneuverability in terms of what you can actually build there. It's a beautiful, absolutely stunning. I've been there. One of the greatest beaches in the world. It's a bay. It's basically it's a U-shaped island with a large beach, and it doesn't have very much possibility of building anything big or permanent. And so what the Navy is going to probably have there is more infrastructure to support a greater number of boats. The airfield over there, I am told, we don't know if it's going to happen in the near future or maybe after a few years, but the existing airstrip on Minicoy is going to be converted into a full-fledged airfield or an air base, which could potentially support fighter and military, cargo operations. Where P8Is possibly could also, could operate from as detachment. And even though these islands are pretty close to India, having that kind of reach into the Indian Ocean is very, very valuable. Another thing that most people perhaps don't know about Minicoy is Minicoy is the southernmost island of the Lakshadweep. It is actually closer to Maldives than it is to the rest of Lakshadweep and to the Indian mainland. It's 150 kilometers from the northern tip of the Maldives, but it is almost 250 kilometers from the rest of Lakshadweep. So it's this tiny, very remote southern island that belongs to the Lakshadweep chain, where India is going to be building this stuff. So when we think of Lakshadweep, it's not like just some random island in this cluster where we're building a naval base. It's like far out, 250 kilometers deep into the Indian Ocean, very close to Maldives, where India is building all this stuff. And it sends out a message. I agree with you completely. It's not like, Modi went to Lakshadweep and suddenly we decided, ye sab karenge. I have a feeling it's actually the other way around.
Okay.
All of this stuff was already planned. And Modi went there, in my view, not just to send out a political message about Lakshadweep, but to kind of gun the system into action as far as Lakshadweep is concerned. You radiate that message into the entire system saying Lakshadweep is important, and now the system is going to work towards doing all these things for Lakshadweep. And that's the reason why it's happened. So make no mistake, whether it's a few boats or a few ships, the ability to operate your drones from Minicoy, it is hugely, hugely valuable. And I'm actually quite excited to see what they do with it next. Minicoy is one of the 3 islands in the Lakshadweep that actually have resorts. So, a lot of tourists are, wondering whether with the Navy's arrival there, could it mean that, resorts got to move out from there? And it's a spectacular island. Could it become, off limits for tourists in the future? Who knows? We don't know that yet. But all I can say is that the strategic importance of the Lakshadweep, I'm not going to say it was never there. There was always a recognition, but there were constraints. In 2006, I had done a story in the Indian Express about how the island that has Lakshadweep's airport cannot support big jets, and it cannot support fighter aircraft. So the Indian Air Force had actually put up a proposal saying, right at the end of the runway, there's water, the sea begins, but just a short distance away, there's another small island. So what the Indian Air Force had proposed is, if we reclaim land between the runway and that island, we can extend the runway onto that island and create a longer runway for better infrastructure. And that was shot down by the government because of environmental concerns. Because, and I think rightly so, the Environment Ministry at the time in 2006 had said, look, these are very, very fragile coral islands. So there's no question of destroying coral to reclaim land and build a runway and stuff. That's not going to happen. You figure out how you want to do things otherwise, but that is something we cannot accept. So I think that was the right decision. But that could happen in Minicoy because Minicoy has enough land to support a large airbase. So maybe that'll happen now.
Yeah, right. You touched upon 2 points while you were speaking right now that I actually wanted to discuss with you anyway. Is about, and this is sort of a tangential point to the larger discussion that we're having, but very much linked to Lakshadweep, is the clash between your military needs, your military infrastructure, and A, tourism, and B, ecology and environmental concerns. I'll give you the example of our capital, the place where the two of us operate from. Every Republic Day, the 4 or 5 days before that, most of airspace around Delhi airport is shut because the Air Force needs it for its practice runs for the Republic Day parade. And even on a daily basis, a large part of Delhi's airspace is shut for commercial airliners because, of course, national capital, important air bases, etc. And in fact, if people go back, I forgot the year this happened, but there was an air disaster. I think it was called the Charkhi Dadri crash. And one of the reasons for the crash was that the commercial flight operations had a very narrow corridor to operate in Delhi, because of which an incoming flight and outgoing flight were in the same corridor and almost at the same flight level. After the crash, I think the corridor was expanded. The Air Force did give up some space for commercial operations. Delhi may not be the greatest example because national capital, you obviously take that into account, but you are getting where I'm coming from. There are examples of tourists having been fined at certain airports because those are technically air bases operated by the Indian Air Force, where photography is not allowed, but the tourists don't know that. They are going there for a vacation. So they are happily clicking pictures at the airport, and then they get fined or caught for that. I don't think the Air Force is very anal about that, but in certain cases you can understand that they'd want to implement what's the rule of the law. How do you see the clash between your country's military needs with tourism, especially like places like Lakshadweep. You mentioned that Minicoy has a fantastic resort, and there are concerns that it might have to go away. Don't want to get into the speculation over there. And second, the concerns of environment, because I think when it comes to India's military infrastructure, I've seen zero public discourse, public debate. I'm pretty sure it must happen at the government level, but public discourse on whether a particular military infrastructure or project is impacting that area's environment, whether it's the northeast, whether it's the Himalayas, whether it's Lakshadweep, whether it's Andaman Nicobar Island, because I think it comes with the sense of arey, by national security and all that, so we cannot be discussing that. Your take on this, because I'm very conflicted.
No,
about
it's a
this.
really good question, and also, like most things in this country, the system has to strike a balance. There are innumerable examples, Dave, of military proposals that have been shot down because of environmental concerns, because of economic concerns, because of simple geographical concerns. A number of them, and the example that I gave you of the runway extension in Lakshadweep is only one of them. The DRDO wanted to set up a missile telemetry and testing facility in the Andaman Islands. That was shot down as well. The Navy wanted a test range in the Andaman Islands, shot down by this government. And the Navy has been trying hard to get that kind of thing, saying that this is a perfect place where from an island we can fire a missile onto another island. They've been able to do that in a limited way, but they haven't been able to set up a range. So there are no shortage of examples of this kind of proverbial clash between environmental concerns and military compulsions. But I think that's okay. I think that shows the system is working. If you've got a system that is weighing concerns for the environment, which should be a long-term concern for every nation, especially one like India, along with your security, threat perceptions, and needs, that's a good thing. You can't use national security as a kind of battering ram to get whatever you want. That's not the way a country should work, because then we would be no different from say China or Pakistan. And as a country that has commitments as far as environmental concerns are there, it's good that the system pushes back on some of these proposals from the military. Since you talked about the military having to share space with civilian stuff, we have a great example from just this week, Anant Ambani's wedding in Jamnagar.
Yes.
Jamnagar happens to be a high security MiG-29 base not far from the Pakistan border, where India's maritime strike fighters are based. Photography is not permitted. It's a highly secured combat aviation base of the Indian Air Force. It's also from where the petroleum fields of the Reliance Industries are protected by these MiG-29s, because it's a huge economic part of the country. That airport, which is a high security defense establishment, just became India's most crowded business jet destination. Okay,
full of paparazzi.
I'm saying the Indian Air Force must have had a thing or two to say about that. But the Indian Air Force, functions in a democracy. They know that they will have to share space. And permissions would have been taken. The Indian Air Force would have been brought on board. It's not like the Reliance doesn't know the Indian Air Force, or the Indian Air Force doesn't know Reliance. Jamnagar is Reliance, for God's sake. So in many ways, I'm just saying that's an example of how the most high security places are not rigid. They can be flexible when it comes to something of this kind. So I think if you take the example of Minicoy, we don't know just yet what's going to happen. Karwar, since you mentioned it earlier, that was a place where large swaths of land, which people owned, or which was government land, became military land. And when land is converted into military land, the rules change completely. Nothing can be built nearby.
Yes.
There are specific laws that apply to that land. If something goes wrong on that land, specific acts kick in. You can get into serious trouble if you do something wrong on that land. So all those things are definitely there. So, but I think any mature democracy, and I think India is one, has the mettle to take these decisions. And believe you me, I can fill books with the number of proposals the military has put forward where it has been disappointed. Whether it is mess halls, whether it is clubs, whether it is missile ranges, whether it is artillery sites, whether it is ammunition depots, whether it is ladies' clubs, whether it is fences, whatever it is, there have been so many proposals that have been shot down because, civilian concerns or economic concerns or environmental concerns have kicked in. So the balance is definitely there. It's a case-to-case basis.
Yeah, right. And like Shiv said, we'll keep a close eye on what happens at the Minicoy Island, because I think that will kind of give us like sort of the blueprint of what happens when.
I sure hope we can still visit, because it would be a pity if civilians can't visit anymore.
Yeah.
That's all I can really say.
Right. Right. We'll move to the other big event that happened with the Indian Navy this week, and also the larger discussion on what the Indian Navy's aspirations are. If you're confused what I meant by that, just hold on, and we'll be back after a quick break.
But later, when I went through a divorce, that's really a lot of trauma before, after, during. I mean, people just use this word divorce very, 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 very lightly. But it has, you become an unbelievable human after that, because it's an unbelievable challenge. And it's an unbelievable challenge before you want to get divorced, during the divorce, and after. All three are unbelievable challenges in that. And I think that really, the divorce, my whole spine broke.
And how old were you when this happened?
No, my backbone broke as soon as I left, and I couldn't understand that then. But then your back is your support structure of your body. It supports you. So when I have left the financial and the physical, I've left all of that, and there's no one who's taking care in a way. And I have a daughter. And my family, I have zero family in Bombay, and I was living in Bombay. I had to take care of a house. I didn't know how to take care of bills. My ex-husband used to do all of that. I didn't know how to book tickets. I did not know how to do anything. I didn't realize how close I was.
Yeah.
And my spine, tuck, 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 tuck. Every time I was stressed out, I would feel it in my right arm. I would feel a full paralysis. Like my hands would become like this. I will not be able to move it, because my stress would move into my arm, and I would just be like, oh my God, like it would be right there. So I feel it every time there's a stress. I can feel it in my neck. I can feel it in my shoulder. I can feel all of it physically manifesting in my body.
And how long did this go on for? How long were you at a mercy of your physical pain?
It was, I think, nearly 6 years, I would say.
Welcome back. Shiv and I are discussing the military importance of the Lakshadweep Islands located off India's western coast, how it compares to India's historic interest along the islands of the eastern coast, which are the Andaman Islands, Andaman Nicobar Islands. Shiv's given us a nice overview of what's about to happen on the islands with the setting up of a new naval base called the INS Jatayu on the Minicoy Island, which is around 250 to 300 kilometers away from the existing naval base in the Lakshadweep Islands. We'll move slightly towards the coast to another event that happened today, if I'm not wrong. Yes, on 6 March, which was the induction of, I forgot the number, but Seahawk helicopters, the primary role for which I'm guessing is going to be anti-submarine warfare. Obviously, you tell us, nerd moment, obviously, like always, because I think we on this podcast we'll always cover whenever there's a new equipment being inducted into Indian military, because that's something I think both the two of us love, and I'm pretty sure our listeners and viewers love. So obviously, tell us about these helicopters, what they're all about, and also I want to understand the technology of anti-submarine warfare from the air, because the way what I've read about anti-submarine warfare, see, first of all, you need highly, high-tech sonars for that, which I'm guessing can be operated only from the sea, if I'm not wrong, not really from the air. So you needed ships to kind of send those pings, and then the velocity with which those pings come back to you, that's how you kind of determine where a submarine is lying. And submarines, by the very nature, are very notoriously hard to detect. So how does a helicopter go around tracking and taking on a submarine? So yeah, tell us about all of this.
So these helicopters have just been commissioned into service in the Indian Navy in Kochi, in Kerala, in a aviation squadron called INS 334. The helicopters are called the MH-60 Romeos, or Seahawks, as you just call them. They are manufactured by Lockheed Martin and Sikorsky. Sikorsky is actually the company that invented the helicopter, many years ago. This is a top of the line naval combat helicopter. A helicopter that is something that gives sleepless nights to anyone you deploy it against, because it's called a flying frigate by many because of how much kit and how much hurtful stuff it carries in that little compact space. And these are everyone's heard of the Black Hawk, the
Yes.
Black Hawk Down. It's the same airframe. The Hawk airframe, the UH-60 Black Hawk airframe is exactly what's used here. It's a navalized helicopter, so it's built to operate off ship decks and aircraft carriers. And this was a deal that India signed after over a decade and a half of dilly-dallying, meandering, the same sad story that we've discussed here on In Our Defense several times about India's procurement process. But basically, the Indian Navy has always had a fleet of helicopters called the Sea Kings. These are British origin helicopters that we bought way back in the 70s, 80s. Fabulous helicopters that were basically our anti-submarine, anti-ship fleet. But as fabulous as they were, they've reached the end of their life. So for the last 10 years, the Indian Navy has been struggling to find a way to replace them. There have been contests, tenders, cancellations, aborts. The usual saga that we see here in India. And finally, in 2020, the Indian Navy was able to sign a deal with the United States. It was a government-to-government deal for 24 of these Romeos, as they call these helicopters. Fabulous helicopters, very, very well armed. And I'll come to how they actually do their deadly job in just a moment. But so we've got 6 helicopters delivered so far. It's an order for 24. So 18 more of these helicopters will be delivered over the next few years. So a total of 24 helicopters will be part of the INS 334 squadron in Kochi in Kerala. But since their deliveries began in 2022, they've already been, the squadron comes to life today, Dave. But these helicopters have already been operating. It's not like they're sitting around waiting for clearance to fly. They've been flying operations. They've been on anti-submarine warfare patrol. They've been flying off our aircraft carriers. They were part of the Milan exercise that just got over in the Indian Ocean. So these helicopters are already live. They're active. They're operational. They're doing their work. Now, they come obviously very, very heavily armed. That's the reason why they're called, flying warships. They carry their primary weapon. Their primary mission, of course, is anti-submarine warfare. And for that, they have sonars, dunking sonars, which are basically, sonars which they can dunk into the sea via a winch to detect what's in the water at that time. They're able to deploy sonobuoys. Sonobuoys are electronic gadgets which plop into the water. A bunch of them can be dropped into the water at great distances, and they triangulate if within their geographical spread that they are surrounded by, if there is an enemy submarine somewhere there, and all of that data is fed back to the helicopter or to anyone who's plugged into that data. So that's these are the 3 things that form its anti-submarine arsenal. Apart from that, they've got AGM-114 Hellfire missiles, very famous. Those are the missiles that Predator drones fire. AGM. These are precision-guided missiles, basically for land targets. They've also got 70mm laser-guided rockets, which are brutally powerful, systems to attack ships and boats and things like that. And they've got the Mk-54 torpedo. The torpedo, which is your submarine-killing weapon, is also something that's on board this helicopter. So these are this helicopter is a nightmare for a submarine commander. If this particular helicopter takes off from a deck, it means that you've already been spotted, probably, or that the guy whose side you're not on, they know that you're there, and this helicopter is on its way to confirm your presence. And if it confirms your presence, and if the helicopter pilot gets the order to, finish the job, then God help you. That's basically what the Seahawk does. I've spoken to Seahawk commanders both in the U.S. Navy as well as in the Australian Navy as well, and their entire thing about the Seahawk is that once you have him, he's not getting away.
Wow.
So that's how it is.
That's quite the vivid description for these helicopters. So I'm glad we have them now, especially because you have to look at this in the context of China's aggressive expansion of a submarine fleet. I think most maybe our listeners know, but China actually a couple of years ago was able to surpass the US as the world's largest submarine fleet operator.
Yeah.
Not officially, because China being China does not reveal
You never
numbers.
know. Yeah.
But the estimate now is that China has around 70 plus submarines, while the US is around 65, 68 submarines.
Right.
The Chinese Navy also is regarded only in terms of sheer numbers, not in terms of technology and capabilities, but in terms of sheer numbers. The Chinese Navy, the People's Liberation Army Navy, is also the world's largest naval force. Where I'm getting at with this is what I referred to before the break when I said the aspirations of the Indian Navy, because unlike the Indian or any air force or any land-based army. The Navy, apart from just being an offensive and defensive arm, also has the other objective of projecting power. Something that Shiv has referred to previously in our episodes. That navies project power.
Right.
They are like sort of flag bearers in the ocean. They are also like a very vital diplomatic tool, in times of crises and in other countries, whether it's natural disasters, fires, earthquakes, etc. You send relief via your ships. You've had the Navy play an important role in evacuating Indians when they're caught up in a war. It's happened a couple of times in the Middle East. So the Navy has this additional sort of an objective. Why did I refer to China being the largest and also the US Navy? So there is this term, I don't know if you mentioned that previously in this episode, but there's this term that's known as blue water Navy, blue water aspirations. The perfect example of that, of which is the US Navy. They have bases all over the world. They have God knows how many aircraft carriers, all of which go around the world with large
They're all
number
nuclear powered,
a large number of ships and also a large number of submarines. You have China rapidly expanding its submarine force. Again, because China being China, you never know officially, but whenever there's an investment in an island nation, you can assume that China has some sort of control on a base somewhere. So China has, I'm guessing, some sort of control in some foreign bases. India does not have a single, I think, base in a foreign country, naval base. I think there was some talk about a base being set up in Seychelles. I'm not sure where that's reached. I think you can expand on that a bit later when you talk about it. So does the Indian Navy have an aspiration of being a true blue water force, or are we just happy controlling and ensuring our backyard is secure? Because remember, our backyard is quite vast. The ocean is named after this country. It's not that we have rights to all of it. Technically, we have rights to only what the international law permits. But the Indian Ocean is vast. We'd like to be in charge of that. So are we okay with just being in charge of that, or do we also have aspirations like the US of having bases in foreign countries, being able to sail all across the world and stuff like that?
No, great question. And the reason why this is a good question, Dave, is because the question has many different answers, and it has been a question that continues to be asked for decades together. The short answer to your question is absolutely yes. India does have blue water, desires and aspirations.
Sorry to cut you short, just for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, because I understand the term blue water. Can you also just explain that?
I'll explain it. Yeah. So a blue water navy is a navy that's capable of deploying its force levels far away from its home bases, preferably in a separate ocean altogether. Like, for example, what would make the Indian Navy a blue water navy is if it is capable of deploying its battle groups, which are its aircraft carrier battle groups or its submarine battle groups, in oceans like the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean, not for slapdash visits, but for extended periods of time, where they're capable of sustaining themselves very far away from shore, like the US Navy's aircraft carriers, for extended periods. And when I say extended periods, I mean like for months and possibly years together. They are practically like an Indian outpost in another ocean, reminding that part of the world that India has the capability to project force this far away from home. So you say blue water because, all water is blue, but in the ocean at least, but, the deep international waters far away from home, being able to do that kind of thing, and not as a kind of momentary kind of visit or a sail through. That's what a blue water navy is. And India has a kind of limited blue water capability already. We send our aircraft carrier out for many months together. We haven't yet sent them into waters outside of the Indian Ocean. At least we don't know if they have been. Unlikely, because it's difficult for an aircraft carrier to go anywhere secretly. But they've been everywhere in the Indian Ocean for months together. And that is a sort of limited blue water capability. But apart from that, combat contingents of Indian ships have been to the South China Sea. They've been to the Indo-Pacific. They've gone through the Malacca Strait. They've been into the Atlantic. Not for extended periods of time. And the reason for that is India doesn't need that right now. It doesn't need to project that kind of force. The force that India needs to project is almost singularly focused on China right now. The force we need to project, let me split it into two ways. On our west coast, in the Arabian Sea and the Persian Gulf, the kind of force we need to project is not against nations, but against asymmetric actors like the Houthis or the Somalian pirates or that kind of thing. So the force we need to project there is a much more kind of localized kind of force, but it's an international responsibility because those are your sea lanes of trade and communication. So it's an international responsibility. And India is right there, so we don't need to project force far away from shore. But when it comes to China, which has been probing the Indian Ocean, trying to establish its blue water capability by sending its submarines into the Indian Ocean. In a previous episode, we talked about how their so-called research vessels are basically mapping the Indian Ocean so their submarines and their aircraft carriers can come into the Indian Ocean, which they haven't so far. Then you start to understand why India's blue water capabilities have to be focused on the eastern side. We don't need to focus it on the western side, because in the west, we've got Africa, we've got Europe, you've got the Middle East, etc., where your linkages are set. We've got relationships with all these countries like Oman and the UAE, even Iran, and so those are not immediate logistical issues. But with China in the east trying to penetrate the Indian Ocean constantly, encircle India, turn Maldives around, create a situation in Sri Lanka where they're building ports, etc., right at India's doorstep. Now you've got the reason why the Indian Navy no longer plays it defensive, by doing things only in the Indian Ocean is, no, you guys want to come here, we're going to come to the South China Sea where you are most vulnerable. We will sell our BrahMos weapons to the Philippines and to Vietnam, to put you on notice. So those are the games that India actually plays. But just to end this particular thought, much is said about China and how big its navy is and how many ships it has and how it's bigger submarine force levels than the US. First of all, let's not even compare the quality of Chinese submarines with US submarines. US submarines function away from their home bases all through the year. Chinese submarines, we don't know what they do, even though they have sailed into the Indian Ocean. So I'm not saying underestimate them. I'm not trying to ridicule Chinese forces. Nobody would ever do that. You have to respect what the Chinese have managed to do with their, sort of aggressive intent and focus as far as the military is concerned. They've got 2 aircraft carriers which have not gone anywhere outside Chinese waters. So we have to inject a certain degree of realism also, and not get overwhelmed by Chinese force. Their ships have, hardly left those waters. They hardly have a blue water capability to speak of. If you ask me, the Indian Navy has may have a much smaller navy. We have a much smaller navy, but we have a much bigger blue water capability. We're not building submarines like biscuits, but our submarines are able to travel pretty far. We may not be able to churn out aircraft carriers like they do, but our aircraft carriers have gone way further from the Indian mainland than the Shenyang and whatever else they're building have done from Chinese bases. So, a reality check is needed. Having a huge, vast armada of ships doesn't mean you have the capability to sustain them far away from shore. So China is not a blue water navy just yet. It desperately wants to be that because it knows that without having a blue water capability, it stands no chance of pushing back against the United States. The United States has it completely encircled. whether it is in the Indian Ocean, whether it is in the Western Pacific. China is completely surrounded by the US Navy, and the US Navy builds nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, nuclear-powered submarines like pizza. Okay, so there's no comparison. So I just wanted to say that as far as blue water capabilities are concerned, India has a much smaller, less aggressive path, but it's much more focused now. And with these responsibilities under the Quad,
Yes.
with the United States, we're no longer functioning just for ourselves. We've plugged into a kind of alliance, even though they don't like calling themselves a military alliance. It's very much a security handshake between these four powers. And it has responsibilities as far as blue water Navy capabilities is concerned.
Right. Yeah, very interesting answer, because I was wondering about this when I was doing the research all throughout. Like, we'll talk about Lakshadweep, and then we'll go to this whole aspect of blue water and the aspirations of the Indian Navy. A slightly academic and tangential question: how does a country and how do we go about developing this doctrine of what does your Navy want to do? Because the way I see it, governments come and go. Even if you have the same party or the same person being in the hot seat for a large number of years, whether it's 5 or 10 or 15, etc. But how do you evolve a doctrine for a navy? Because I see, the way I see it, this is gonna be lasting, right? So if you have decided that 50 saal mein I want to be able to send my ship, let's say in the Pacific Ocean, you start working at it from right now, so that you reach there in 50 years. Then every government that comes during that, for those 50 years, have to work towards that incrementally. So how does it happen? Like, who is it? Is it just the Navy officers, and during their annual conference, for example, with the ones that are happening right this week as we speak, where they discuss the academic topics and then they present a proposal to the government, which is then signed off? Or is it just like, chota you react to things? Like right now, like you mentioned very correctly, so we are completely focused on containing China and what it's kind of trying to do in the Indian Ocean and in and around the Bay of Bengal. So is it reactive, or does India have this long-term dream idea for how its navy should be in the next 30, 40, 50 years?
The brutal answer to that is that Nehru had talked about sea blindness. He talked about something called sea blindness, which is something that India suffered from for a very long time, which is that we were so overwhelmingly focused on our army and our air force and protecting our land borders. A country that has a 7,650 kilometers coastline, one of the longest coastlines of any country in the world, we've practically ignored it, which is why we live in a preposterous situation where your navy, which should, in an ideal world, given our geography, be the largest of your forces, is actually the smallest of the three armed forces. So as far as security priorities are concerned, we're saddled with a kind of legacy lopsidedness already. I'm not saying that that's an excuse for anything. Things have been corrected. Many things are moving, in the right direction. But we're pushing back against trying to shed that legacy of not having focused enough on the Navy. And we talked about it in the 2611 episode as well. Now, as far as long-term doctrine is concerned, yes, I have to be frank about this. The Indian armed forces are not, incremental and ad hoc like that. They've got very clear, and the Navy especially has a very clearly focused, a long-term perspective plan. And these perspective plans are updated, fine-tuned, course-corrected, etc., depending on the politics of the day, depending on your security outlook, your scenario, what your new threats could be. And things have changed vastly in the last few months after the Israel war, etc. So those things, have a fair amount of continuity depending, irrespective of which government is in power. So that's one good thing. It's not dependent on that. But one has to understand that, whether it is your look east policy, whether it is your far east policy, whether it is, the neighborhood policy of India, there has to be consistency and focus. Now, you took the example of wanting to send your aircraft carrier into the Pacific. The question is, can India do it? We can. But do we need to do it? Why do we need to do it? Do we want that kind of blue water capability just to flex strength? Or do we be realistic about our resources, our man and woman power, and focus our strengths, in a kind of laser focused way on what our real intentions, objectives, and threats are. In this particular case, as far as conventional national naval threats are concerned, we don't really have any more adversaries other than China and to a smaller extent Pakistan. For instance, China is about to supply Pakistan with 8 conventional submarines with air-independent propulsion. So these are kind of quasi-nuclear submarines in terms of what they can do underwater. They can stay underwater for a long time. That's going to be a challenge for us in the Arabian Sea. That's going to add a whole new dynamic in terms of what our anti-submarine capability is concerned. But India's objective as a naval force, at least as far as my understanding of the long-term perspective plan is not about projecting power the way the United States projects it. We have to understand that India is not the kind of is not a cowboy nation. It's not. It doesn't see itself as a global police. It doesn't see itself as a country that needs to send a carrier battle group into the Atlantic because it's cool to do so, or because it wants to flex some muscle or power project or whatever. Your Shakti Pradarshan karna hai. It's not that kind of country. That culture isn't there. We're very, we're very defensive as far as our and in this case, that's a good thing. The reason why those blue water expeditionary missions take place is because India has realized that being defensive can't be your only mix. It can't be your only combat matrix. You have to be able to show your adversary in their backyard that, hey, I can come here too. So, have second thoughts about your next move. We can't just be guarding our territory on our territory. It has to also be the ability to go to take the fight to your adversary's area. I'm simplifying it, but you know what I'm saying. So as far as the Navy in the Indian Ocean is concerned, our doctrine is simple. It is about maintaining absolute and unquestionable dominance, that the Indian Navy is the prime actor in the Indian Ocean. Nobody else. Not China, not any of the Southeast Asian countries. It certainly can't be Africa because they're all dependent on either India and China or any other country. It is India alone, and the Indian Navy alone that is the prime actor, the prime police force, the prime military response force if something goes wrong, the primary response force as far as humanitarian relief is concerned. Like, for example, if a tsunami or a cyclone or something happens, that is your doctrine right now. The doctrine is that, hello, this is the Indian Ocean. We're not going to share it with anyone. We are the dadas of the Indian Ocean region. You can please pass through international waters, but we're going to watch you. You can have a nice trip through the Indian Ocean, but nobody else controls this territory except us. That is the Indian Navy's doctrine right now. And the reason why China wants to get into the Indian Ocean is because certain realities cannot be changed. China's energy security, China's trade has to pass through the Indian Ocean. They have no choice. They have no choice. They would love to be able to bypass the Indian Ocean to get their trade and their energy. They cannot do that. So they're dependent on India's whims and fancies. We are a responsible country. We're not going to disrupt trade and energy security of any country. But China doesn't want to leave that to India. What if things go south between India and China in a much worse way, and India has the leverage of controlling what is traveling towards China? Then what? So China doesn't want that. That's the reason why they want to put their footprint in the Indian Ocean to prevent India from having that kind of leverage. And then the Indian Navy is fully prepared to prevent that.
I think this is a very good example, illustration that you gave, because that actually kind of happened. I forgot which, was it during Kargil or was it during the 71 war? But I think it was during Kargil. The Indian Navy, though the areas are a bit different, but the Indian Navy was able to lay sort of a very successful blockade of Pakistan, preventing energy, petrol, etc. from reaching the country. And I think there was a brief moment when Pakistan was on the verge of running out of fuel.
71 war.
71 war. Yeah. So that's a very good example of what navies can do apart from just, firing missiles. And to the aspect of what you said about the Indian Navy wanting to ensure that we are the dadas of the Indian Ocean, I think so far we've been able to kind of do that, right? Without being blinded just because I'm an Indian. I think we have been able to do that, and China is trying to upset it. I don't know. Let's see how that goes. And, when you were saying all of that, that a thought just came into my mind that the next couple of decades are going to be very interesting to watch in the Indian Ocean. Like you have the standoff along Ladakh. It might not be as physical as that, but there might be flashpoints between India and China around the Indian Ocean. That'll be something that will be interesting to watch. Right. As we bring this episode to a close, the gossip that I wanted your thoughts on. I think we made this sort of a habit now. Like we bring the episode
End
to
with
an
gossip.
end with gossip. So I forgot. This was I think around 15 years ago. I think 15 odd years ago, 10, 15 years. I was in Navy Nagar. For people who are not from Mumbai, Navy Nagar is located in in the most prime location of Mumbai.
Yeah,
Okay,
Kolaba, right?
Kolaba, yeah. And even within Kolaba, it is on the southern tip of
Yeah,
Mumbai. So you
Land's
have,
End.
yeah, Land's End. You have sea on three sides
Yeah.
and you have land behind you. Navy has that property.
Yeah, yeah.
Talking about clashes between civilians and and defense establishment. That's for someone from the city like me. I was in envy. I was like, my God, you guys have this wonderful
Best
ocean
place
view,
in
best
Bombay,
place to
yeah.
live, right? Anyway, so I was in Navy Nagar visiting somebody. I won't say which force because both Coast Guard and the Navy operate from there. I was visiting somebody over there. And I got this gossip that this was the time when Karwar was being developed as a naval base, INS Kadamba,
Yeah.
like you said, right? And what I was told was that there was a proposal, a very serious proposal for the Western Naval Command headquarters to be
shift.
moved from Mumbai to Karwar. But every single naval officer who was staying in Navy Nagar in Kolaba and in Mumbai was completely opposed to the idea. One, logistically speaking, the person who told me explained it that yes, there's nothing in Karwar. There are no markets, there are no schools, there are no hospitals, there's nothing. There is no life as such. Obviously, that would develop because a base is coming up, so the infrastructure would come up. But second, obviously, you want to stay in Mumbai. Can you confirm this really happened?
No, of course, 100% true. It's 100% true, and I've reported on this, in the Indian Express and in India Today that there were active considerations, in fact, intentions that the Western Naval Command headquarters would shift to Karwar.
Because there is no space in
The
Mumbai.
reason for that, A, is no space in Mumbai. B, that apart from a limited force, the naval harbour area, the congestion in Mumbai was just too big because of the increased and expanded trade and merchant shipping traffic. It was just impossible for the Navy to have more capacity, and the Navy needed like 3 times its capacity that it had in Mumbai. And given that INS, it was called Project Seabird, what the Karwar base was called at that time, now INS Kadamba, was expanding in a really big way. I think the Navy initially didn't realize that Karwar was going to be so, such an excellently executed project. Deep water harbors, the ability to deploy submarines there. Your aircraft carriers are both based over there, both the Vikramaditya and Vikrant. And therefore, it was, it kind of unfolded as an excellent base. And once all those issues of land and, territory and, the problems with the civilian administration was sorted out, it has become one of the biggest naval bases in Asia.
Yeah.
I think at last count, Kadamba is the biggest naval base in Asia, far bigger than the Western Naval Command, and potentially bigger. It's going to actually become bigger because it's going to have to support many more warships. It's going to be your key location. And it also ticks many boxes because, having a big amount of naval infrastructure in a big city like Mumbai is not optimal.
Yes.
Because, lots of weaponry, lots of stuff very close to Mumbai. You saw the Sindhu Rakshak explosion
Yes.
in the naval harbor in Mumbai, big economic center. So all of these compulsions were definitely there, Dave. So I confirm it 100% that the intention certainly existed, if not still exists. We don't know if it could still happen or not. Probably not, because maybe that's water under the bridge. But INS Kadamba is a huge base, and it will basically be the combat arm of the Western Naval Command. Maybe who knows? I remember even reading reports that if the Western Naval Command can't shift to Karwar, maybe Karwar will be its own command called the Southwestern Naval Command. That was a very short-lived report. It didn't really happen. I actually have a Karwar connection. My dad's mother is from Karwar.
Oh,
That's
wow.
her native place. And I've been there several times. I've seen INS Kadamba from it being just land to it being this huge sprawling facility with a ship lift facility and all manner of amazing things. So it's truly a spectacular naval base. And I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in the future, a shift like this happens. But I can tell you that when you were there and you heard this gossip, it was fact. It was really, really on the table.
Right. Right. I think we ended right there. Thanks, Shiv, once again. And great insights into not just what's about to happen in Lakshadweep and how it is of great strategic and military value to India and the Indian Navy, but also about the Indian Navy in general and its larger aspirations, the whole thing about Blue Water Force, etc. Great chat, fun chat, as always. Thanks, as always, to our producer, Anna Priyadarshini. That's it for this week's Defense Dose. For more, tune in next week. Till then, stay safe and do not cross any boundaries with our passport. Bye-bye.